Call the meeting to order, and the time is 6:03. And let's go ahead and start with the roll call in alphabetical order. Claudia Albarca. Estelle Andrade.
Present.
Robert Carriedo.
Here.
David Garcia Sua.
Present.
Okay. Michael Haslett. Rudy Lopez.
Here.
Myself, Rafael Munoz, is here. Kimberly Tenorio and Manuel Vasquez. Manuel Vasquez is here, correct?
He was here. He's still in there.
Okay, maybe he's muted, but I see the MV on the screen.
Yeah, he's there.
I'm here.
I'm assuming he's here and he's just
He's
muted.
right there. He's right there on the bottom of the screen. Yeah.
Good. Great. And let us go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Hand over your right hand over your heart, and let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item number 3. Are there any people who have requested comment or the public comment period of agenda item number 3?
No, there is no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Let us move on to item number 4, draft 2020-2001 Proposition O Financial and Performance Audits presented by Crow LLP.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Munoz. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Salkeld and her team from staff and to the Crow team to do the presentation.
Great, thank you.
Dr.
Thank you.
Salkeld?
Thank you, Janaea. And good evening, Mr. Munoz and committee members. So what we have presented today, which will be done by Kevin Smith and Charles Ribley with Crow, are the draft audit financials for the Proposition O program. And there's 2 components to it. There's a financial piece as well as the performance audit. Both are in accordance with the Proposition 39 requirements. And it circles back to the conversation that we had shared with the committee back in August when we looked at the scope of the engagement, when the Crow team had highlighted some of the specifics and we got some feedback from the committee. So our work since that time, since August, we've been working very diligently on pulling a lot of financial information, a lot of samples, working closely with the Crow team and also with Janaea's team on a lot of the specific projects. And so we're bringing this forward today to the committee. We then anticipate bringing these financials as well as the district-wide financials to the audit committee on December 6th, and then to bring it forward to the board on December 13th for action. This is the first time in a very long time that we're back on what I call a normal schedule, which are statutory requirements around our district-wide financials are in December, on December 15th. And the state has extended a little bit of a period through January 31st, but we're getting back to that normal schedule. So again, we worked very closely with a lot of folks here on this call or this meeting. So very happy to say that we're back on track with that. So I think at this point, I'd like to hand over to Kevin Smith and Charles Ribley to go through the specifics with the draft report.
Thank you, Dr. Salkeld. And as Dr. Salkeld said, it is a pleasure to be here in November of the fiscal year under audit. I can't thank Janae and her team as well as the finance staff enough for the amount of work that they've done to put us in this position. An external audit is an iterative process. We request lots of information. As they provide information, it drives lots of questions. And management has continued to respond to us in a very timely manner and has allowed us to get, as Dr. Salkeld said, back onto a normal track. Charles, if you would please share the financial statements. which I believe has already been provided, but we will put up on screen just to kind of walk through. Want to point out a couple key items. If you'll go to the opinion, Charles. So the financial statements are really the responsibility of management. However, we have been engaged to perform an audit under generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards. We are in the process of concluding our audit. It's in the final review stages. No additional work foreseen, just review addressing various pending items, etc. We believe that we will be issuing an unmodified opinion, which means that the financial statements for the Propo bonds are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and are fairly stated based upon those generally accepted accounting principles. Really means two things. One, that the books and records of the district support what is presented to you in these financial statements, and that they are prepared on a consistent basis with the regulatory body. Really two statements within the financial statements. If you go to the balance sheet, Charles, as you can see, there is approximately $38 million in assets. The vast majority of that is in cash, which is clearly a focal point of our auditing procedures. A variety of accounts payable as it relates to construction contracts throughout. Going to the statement of activities or the income statement or statement of revenues and expenditures and changes in fund balance, very consistent with what you would expect based upon where the life of the Propo bonds are. Very limited income, no new bond issuances, interest income based upon those cash balances, and a spending down of those cash balances based upon the projects. Very consistent with the expectations, and again, supported by the books and records, and based upon our auditing procedures, we believe that it's an accurate presentation of the Propo bonds. The footnotes that follow the financial statements go into greater detail over a variety of aspects within the financial statements. Won't go through those and read verbatim, but all of it is consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. And again, we will be issuing an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance provided upon the financial statements. Under California state law, we do an additional step though. In addition to just saying, are the financial statements prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, we go through and test a variety of audit objectives specified within state law, as well as a few procedures that have been agreed to by both management as well as the CBOC. We have performed our procedures there, and we're prepared to issue in layman's terms, again, an unmodified opinion. Based upon the results of our test work, we believe that the district has performed or is in compliance with the objectives set forth that we discussed in August. Very quickly, Charles, if you'll go through this report, because it's a little unlike other reports. The next step or the next page is an overall kind of summary of the Propo bonds, when they were issued, the amounts that they were issued, and the purpose and fundings. Very descriptive in nature and very consistent with what was presented in the prior year. The next portion of the report goes into a variety of the objectives, and each one of these spells out the objective that we discussed in August, as well as the exact procedures performed. Gives you an idea as to the procedures performed, as well as the scope or representative sample size. So how much did we test in comparison with the total population? So we tested X in comparison to Y, as well as spelling out each of the items tested. For each of the objectives that we put forth in August that we would be testing, we have concluded that the district has complied in all material respects. So again, an unmodified opinion from the performance audit standpoint, as well as no significant exceptions. Just flipping through the report very quickly, you can see beginning with each numeric item 2, 3, 4, and 5, then goes into special tests that the district has asked us to perform above and beyond what the California state law has. But in each case, we spell out objectives, procedures performed, as well as our conclusions. And again, in each case, our conclusion based upon the audit procedures performed, in our judgment, the district has complied in all material respects. This is the draft that we are in the process of wrapping up, and we welcome any questions that you might have related to the engagement. And as Dr. Sockeld said, this is what we're prepared to bring forth to the audit committee and to the school board in December. With that, I will pause and answer any questions.
I'm going to unshare my screen so we'd have an opportunity to see each other.
Thank you, Charles.
Mr. Munoz, are there any comments or any questions regarding the presentation?
I have no comments or questions unless there is comments from the committee, and I can ask the committee for their input or any information. Members of the committee, please.
I have no comments or questions.
Hearing no comments, what would be staff's recommendations for how to proceed forward on this?
Jenny, do you want to take that?
At this point, the action is from the, and we will take that we've presented it here to the committee. And if there's any, comments, we would then share it with the audit and finance subcommittee. That body is the one that makes the recommendation to the board for overall approval. But we can certainly, our goal is to highlight that we've presented it to this body and if there are any questions.
Okay. Since there are no comments from myself or members of the committee, I would recommend that it move forward to the Audit and Finance Committee with no further discussion from the CBOC. Any other comments or recommendations on that from the rest of the committee? Then I recommend that we move forward, and with that, do we need a vote, or should we proceed with just accepting the information from from Crow LP?
I think you can just proceed with accepting it. It was a presentation of their draft. And so they can take it from here.
Yes, I think that's what we'll do then, is we'll accept it and proceed with the draft as presented.
And
Thank you
Mr.
very
Munoz, what
much.
we can do as well is with, once the board takes action, that's when the final draft will be presented to the board. We can then follow up with Janaea to then circulate to this committee the final version. And because I know too that we posted online, so we have that as a resource for public access.
Sounds
Jenny,
good.
what's the timeline for when you take it to the board?
December 13th.
Sure. So we can certainly add the final drafts to our next agenda so they have it for the reference.
Okay, then I have our next meeting is January 19th. So from the December, we will probably be presented that information on the 19th then.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep. We'll just include it on that in our agenda.
And it will be December 19th.
Yes. Okay, I'd like to thank Dr. Salkeld and her team and the Crow team for joining us this evening and for presentation. We greatly appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Item number 5 is approval of the meeting minutes of August 18th, 2021. Are there any comments or further recommendations to the minutes of August 18th from members of the committee? Please present now. Hearing and no comments, I do have one comment myself. Item number 12 in a new business future agenda item. It says that Rafael Munoz to meet with Claudia Albarca regarding policies and procedures. I did talk with Claudia. She was tasked with proceeding with the policies and procedures and the revisions. And she did not come to the meeting.
She
And
actually just logged in, Mr. Munoz.
oh,
she
it's
checked.
Claudia.
She joined us a few minutes ago.
Okay. Claudia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Can you give us any information on the policies and procedures update?
Yes, I can. I apologize. I just got out of a community meeting, so I cannot share my screen, but I do have that information. If you'd like, I can send it out later this evening to everyone on what those recommended changes are to the policies and procedures.
Great, great. That would be good. Now, talking with Janaea,
Yes.
okay, I haven't seen what the revised policy updates are. Once
Right.
you receive them, it's still possible to move forward with that and present them to staff and have staff review them and make recommendations. Is that correct or no?
Yes, but I think there's a couple steps in there. So what I would
Yes.
suggest is that Claudia share the information for the committee, and we need to check. I'm not sure if she can distribute that. She can probably send it to Yoli, and Yoli can send it out right to the committee.
Great.
So everybody, we can maybe attach it to tonight's minutes for reference. Might be the way to go about that. And then so folks can start reviewing it. I do believe that you need to have discussion to make sure, and maybe we can schedule that on the January agenda. So there's discussion amongst the committee to make
Great.
sure you all understand what it says. And then
Great.
once you all get to that place, then the next step would you would officially submit it to me for staff review and consideration.
Okay.
And then at that point, if there's anything that I would say, hey, I would, this is probably not something we would want to do, or we would change, then we
Sure.
would kind of do a little back and forth.
Mhm.
And we may be able to hash those things out in the January meeting as well. But, and then once I take and accept it and we are on the same page, then the next step is actually it goes to the superintendent, and the superintendent is the one who would formally take it forward to the board for consideration.
That's great. That's great.
Okay.
Okay. So then I can ask that Yolanda receive that information from Claudia for
Yes.
distribution to the rest of the committee members. And can that be distributed as soon as she receives it for our review and comments, and then her internal discussion and whatever you
Yes,
want to do with that?
Right, and to remind the committee that you cannot be discussing this on the side, you can review the information, but discussion has to hold until you come back together again in January.
Okay.
Okay.
But there can be one-on-one discussion with Claudia as the committee chair for that, can there? On an individual basis.
I believe that's accurate, so we'll confirm that tomorrow, but I think that doesn't break Robert's rules. I think you're allowed to do that. If it's one-on-one, or if you wanted to send her a direct email with some feedback or something, I believe that falls underneath the appropriate criteria, but there just can't be more than, I think, 2 of you, and it can't be ongoing. So it's just,
Sure.
as benign as possible, right? So.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll ask Claudia to please take her draft
Okay.
comments and of the policies and procedures and forward them on to Janaea and Yolanda for distribution to the committee members for our review and comments, so that we have plenty of time to, think about them before the next meeting.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Claudia. You had me
You're
scared
welcome,
there
Rob.
for a while.
No, sorry. I did text you to let you know I was going to be late. I apologize. I'm still here at the office.
Okay. Working hard. All right, great. Thank you very much, Claudia. So that was just part of my process of the approval of the minutes. I would recommend that if we have no other comments in the minutes, that we accept them as presented and note and file them. Any other comments to that? We can move on. Hearing no other comments, we'll move on to item number 7, new business, future agenda items. I have nothing more to say on that other than the next meeting is January 19th. So Janae, I'll ask that you have any information there?
For item number 7 or item number 6?
7
is
or
project
6.
update. So I can kind of roll both of them. So for project updates, I don't have much. So we are actually, when you look at bond projects, we're down to about 5. So I'll just run through them really fast. We have the modernization of the 600 building science wing at Hilltop Middle School. That work should be completed. It's been a little bit of a push and pull, but they'll come across the finish line by the end of January at the latest. Majority of the work will be done by the end of December. By the time they finalize punch lists and we're ready for occupancy, it's pushing towards the end of January. But we've gotten through all of the hard and ugly stuff. Everything's been open, exposed, the structural, where we have things that were compromised, et cetera. And so response plans have been developed, submitted to DSA where necessary, and that project is well underway and starting to round the corner. I would say they're in their last quarter stretch right now, which is great. For those of you that live in, near, or around Bonita Vista High School, and you may or may not have noticed, the stadium facility is well under construction, and it's looking great, going with Byram Davey. At this point, the schedule on that takes us to late summer, very early fall. I'm crossing my fingers and toes that the project continues to move smoothly, and we're more towards the end of summer for when we can turn the facility over to students. As football will start like mid-August. But I would say that we will definitely be seeing their home games for sure. We should see their home games occurring at that stadium as we move into fall sports. So more to come on that. It's going really well and very smoothly so far. So it's been fantastic.
So next year they're going to be playing football out there?
They'll be playing everything out there next year.
Great.
So we'll encroach a little bit into the beginning part of the fall season, but by mid of the fall season and then through the rest of the year, it'll be open and ready to roll. So really
they
nice.
will have night games out there.
They will. They'll have bleacher capacity for 2,000. So, and then Mar Vista Aquatics also moving along really well. No big issues there so far. They are all the infrastructure is getting set. The cuts of the pool are in motion. Ceramics programs coming along, and they're going to be completing that here as we come through the first of the year. Other than that, the status quo, and we are still on schedule for that to be turned over. We'll have beneficial occupancy October, but we should be completely out of there, done by the beginning of the year at the latest, and that's like final payments, everything. So they're well on schedule. With no major concerns or issues to date. And then we have 2 small other projects, one that's been floating, and we just received a revised estimate to see with everything happening in the volatility of the market right now. For some of our bigger projects, we've seen some pretty significant swings. So we weren't sure. I'm still holding my breath for when we actually open bids, but it's the Sioux High concession stand. It's just a small project. We are looking to get that out on the street probably in January or after the first few years, I would say. I think Armando's targeting either the March or April board for award. So the value of it is coming in a little steeper. It was originally estimated at like 350, and it's coming in right now, I think, at like 525. I could actually honestly see that swing a little higher on bid day itself, but we're trying to get it on the street and bid early enough into the first quarter of the year so it's not really an impact for summer sprint work, et cetera, but so we can finally finalize that work. And then we also just received at the last CIP to the board, for anybody who's been at Chula Vista High School, they have a series of significantly compromised overhangs that run down one of their center corridors of the exterior of the buildings that connect multiple buildings. And so there's a section that's been cordoned off for quite some time. And so we don't have the current funds for that, but we do have the funds for the design. And by the time we design it, get it through DSA, et cetera, then we're looking at, you know, the new bonds coming into place and some other things. So we're just trying to get that little project as shelf ready as it can be. And so we're getting underway with some design work for the Chula Vista overhang. Other than that, I mean, we'll see here by the end of the first quarter, we'll be closing out Hilltop Middle School, and the other projects, we should have everything closed by the end of 2022 at the latest is the hope. And then in terms of new bond for DD, with the financial improvements that have been happening, we're probably looking at a year from now before we'll be 100% in position to go out to the market for an issuance on Measure DD and for the next issuance on Measure O. So there will be by the time we're wrapping up the tail end of these, we should be looking to go to market again. And so we are starting to talk about what that will look like, feel like, and sound like, but it's still a ways away before we would be going to market and then being ready to put additional projects on the street. So that's my project updates. And then I don't know if we had announced when we saw you all last that we had finally successfully hired a new project manager. If we did, I'll say it again, just to say it. We actually hired Janice Alcaraz. She is an internal promotion. She had actually recently been hired into our department as a planning specialist, but she actually has a bunch of extra chops to her background, and then applied for the PM position, and she's been placed there. And then in her place this week, we hired a new planning specialist to take over for her. And so Jessica will be joining our team, hopefully right after the Thanksgiving holiday, first part of December. So slowly trying to get the team back up to 100% so we can be supporting all the work that we see coming. And that's about it.
Great. Sorry I skipped over your project updates and staff.
No worries. Thank you, David.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Ralph, I have a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead, Robert.
I wanted to know, with respect to the Mar Vista Aquatic project, whether or not the district has reached or had a memorandum of understanding with the city of Imperial Beach regarding maintenance. Has that progressed at all? Yes,
sir. It was a test. I was going to see if you were going to bring it up. Yes, we have. We've been actually meeting regularly. There's two things happening. There's the main committee, and then there's a subgroup of us that are meeting. The city of IB has hired a new Park and Recs individual who's super awesome and great to work with. So she's working directly with myself, our athletic, or Alex Estrada, who oversees all of our district athletics, and the AP over at Mar Vista. And so one of the things we're doing right now is going through and looking at the day-to-day activities that would need to occur, whether they're on our side of the house or for the city of IB when they're utilizing the facility. And then, so we're prepping all of that in preparation of our meeting when we come together with a broader committee. I think we meet back in December. We have regular meetings that are happening about every 6 to 8 weeks right now. But this will be the framework to start taking us once we get down the day-to-day ins and outs, the program, what style of programs would be in the facility, then that's going to help lead us to those other pieces in terms of who's responsible for what elements within that MOU. So we are on our way and we are making progress. So that's where we stand today.
I have a second question.
Okay.
It sounds as though the district is in the position at this point to, as you say, begin looking into the use of the rest of the Prop O funds and the other proposition. Is that because the SEC has concluded their investigation, and also there is no further investigation going on from the district attorney's office?
So I would actually see if Athena could answer that more solidly. The SEC piece is done. However, there's layers of things that need to happen, as I understand it, behind that to complete the process. I don't have anything definitive for you for the district attorney piece, but in talking with the CFO, with Jenny Salkelt recently, there's by the time there's additional prep that needs to happen and stabilization that needs to be maintained as we get through all of our different interims right now for financial closeouts to make sure that there's balance and stability. And so those things need to be in place before we can go to the market. And so Dr. Salkelt's been putting a really good baseline in place, and she's working with the financial advisors. We're doing all the infrastructure for all of that to occur, and now it's just a matter of the various steps. There's reporting mechanisms, I believe, that they have to put in place in response to the SEC and some other things. And I quite frankly, I don't know all the finite details to it. But I do know that she has communicated that by the time we get through all of it, it would be, late fall by the time we're through all those steps. Athena can jump in here because you probably have better language around it than I do. But it will still be a minute before we are at a place to go to market for issuance. Athena, you want to share what you know more definitively?
Sure. I think you actually said it really well. There's not much holding us back other than we're still, getting our financial foundation underneath of us so that we can set ourselves up to when we go out to get the new issuances, we're going to be in a really good place. So we're continuing to work towards that financial stability, which we've done a really great job of this last couple of years in getting there. So we're almost there. So we're just aligning the timing for that next issuance.
That sounds good. If I might, Ralph, I have one more question.
Go ahead, Robert. It's okay.
So, Janae, with what you both just said, what is the process, or is there a process to determine what projects are going to go, or is the district going to pursue? We don't have a priority list, to my understanding. So how is that process? What is the intention of how that process will go forward?
So it's the same intent. Yeah, so it's the same intention, Mr. Carriedo, that we've talked about all along, of us really finally getting to a place where we definitively knew from a timing perspective when we would be able to go to market so that we can fairly start having discussions with school sites and ultimately community, right? So that whole theory of not creating false hope and no execution because we don't have access to funds. And so now that we can consistently and steadfastly see that work is going to start. And so like Athena and I met last week and we were dusting off we were looking at when we did the last issuance under O, if you recall, there was that score sheet that we had created. We had identified projects by campus and built in the criteria with the facility index assessments from the Jacobs report, if there was ADA or path of traveler safety issues, if we had been looking at the balance of funds that had been distributed to each of the campuses for equity. There's a series of things that we had put into that document, and it helped kick out projects that would be considered and placed on the project prioritization list for the last round of funds. So we'll be doing something similar to that. We will be adding a couple of extra columns and reassessing in terms of where we were when we did that last issuance on O, and if there's some refinement that needs to occur there. This time around, I certainly would be having us take a look at what long-term enrollment impacts would look like. And then we certainly need to, last time we did all campuses together, and I think that that's a disadvantage because you cannot compare a middle school to a high school in terms of needs. So we would separate the two of them, and they would each basically have their own respective prioritization charts, and then still needing to really look at the balance of funds that have been distributed to date amongst the bonds, because there's still not equity in that at all. And so those would be some of the criteria that we'll be looking at. We'll be extracting the information from projects that are identified within the master plan, and also reconnecting with the principals and having those conversations. As we all know, I mean, with facilities, priorities change very quickly over time. And so, what is it that they're seeing and feeling that they need? We have a pretty solid baseline of some things that need to occur. And so putting those on the list and then having those well-rounded conversations. And so Dr. Geary and I were just talking about that actually today, and I will be mapping out kind of what our team's steps will be as we move forward, with the goal that by end of summer at the very latest, we have signed, sealed, and delivered that for the first issuance of the DD funds and the next allocation out of Measure O. We have a list of projects that are taken to the boards for options, I would say by mid to end of summer at the latest. So that's where we are.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
And
thank you.
just to add to that on the finance side, we've been starting the conversations with the debt financing team. So we're going to start those conversations about who are going to be the players in that debt financing team for the upcoming bond issuances.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carriero.
Thank you. Any other comments from the rest of the committee? Okay.
I just had a quick note, Janae.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm overhearing another bond oversight committee is that some of the things they're starting to encounter, especially here in the local San Diego communities, is that the home valuations and home sales are definitely going up.
Yes, they are.
And it's affecting some of the revenues that they're projecting to come in the coming years. Would that, my question is just a note, would that affect any of our bond projects? And
Yes.
now that you're talking about debt and other things, what do you have any insight on how you're preparing for that, or do you see it in the future?
Yeah, so there's a few things that are happening out there that we really are paying close attention to. So, it's kind of like the beauty and the beast of AVs going up, right? And so the one thing that will be a positive, so for Measure DD, our original forecast was that we would have $400 million distributions, because Measure DD is a $403 million bond. So we were slated to get 4 distributions. The current AV projection actually has us at 3 distributions, 2 large sum distributions every other, like a year and a half, like 2 years apart. And then the third one would be a little bit less than 100. So we'll see the money faster, which is great. The other side of things that we're seeing, because there's so much happening and home values are going up, there's also a significant impact in terms of what we're seeing in construction costs, right? And the forecasting for that, and what are those impacts, and where are the swings? And it's kind of like a new day every day out there. There's labor shortages that are happening. There's material slowdowns that are taking place. And on top of all of that, there's also declining enrollment. And so all of those things really start to meld together. And so we will be thoughtful. We will move with caution with the selection of the projects that are going forward, what we're looking for, why we're doing them. And because there's just a lot of moving pieces here that may have substantial and significant impact. We are also doing, I think I've talked with you all about this before, we have Davis Demographics that's out there doing a 7 to 10 year forecast for us. And so they're in the process of putting together their third, it feels weird because of the time warp of COVID, but they're already starting the process for the 3rd year assessment. And that's a lot. Their last forecast that they gave us, we all kind of looked at it and said, oof, okay, is this just because of COVID? Because it was kind of shocking where the numbers were trending. And so we are actually, I am totally confused if we already did it or if we're doing it in December, because we've had so much happening with Davis Demographics on the trustee areas and other things, but I think it's going in December actually. We're adding another layer of work to their contract. So right now they take their assessments based off of parcels and student generation rates, and that's how they make their 7 to 10 year forecast. And they're doing this for our entire district. We're doing this, we're getting information from all of our feeder schools, but we are actually adding to their scope that they are going to have all of our enrollments as well, and our homes of our residents addresses for our students, and they're going to overlay that with their parcel SGR information that they do, so that we can actually see very accurately where our enrollments are trending and what that looks like. And so we should have most of that information. They're forecasting that they'll be finished by the end of January. And that's really going to create a pretty pivotal conversation as a district based off of that information, because it's going to tell us what our next 7 to 10 year trajectory is. That information also takes into account all of the building that's taking place south of south of Olympian High School to Otay Mesa and out to the 5 North, right, or to the 5. And then anything and everything else in between, because they reach out to all of those developers. So there's a lot. When I say there's a lot, there's a lot. And they also look at all the way down to the incoming feeders districts, in addition to looking at existing birth rates. And that's really where a lot of the rub is coming on a lot of those things. The annual decline of birth rates has been 2%. And I think everybody was like, oh, we're going to have a baby boom with COVID. They had the opposite of that. In this last year, the decline actually went to 4%. So that just means there's a bunch of cute little faces that aren't hitting kindergarten. And when they don't hit kindergarten, they don't come to us. And so that's the trajectory that we're looking at. And it's significant. And you can see articles all over the newspaper these days. Not only are we missing out on bus drivers, but there's a lot of chatter starting to happen about students that aren't coming to us because they just don't exist, and then compounded with the people who are leaving California as well. So anyway, that's my long and short of your answer, and I hope I covered it.
Thanks for the insight. No, it's really wonderful that you're thinking in that form. When you were mentioning that, I saw even over here at Paradise Valley, they closed their maternity ward not too long ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's happening Southern California for sure. And it's good that you have that type of insight. Thank you for sharing.
Certainly. So.
Ralph, something else came to my mind. I have another question.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I have a question too that came to my mind. Go ahead.
Janae, this may be kind of like out in left field, but it's something that has been on my mind for a few years. Mm-hmm. I was part of a committee, which was an offshoot of this committee. It was called the 7-Eleven Committee.
Yes.
Where they were talking about selling the property that the district owns. I think we authorized or made a recommendation to sell the property that the district has on 3rd Avenue. Mm-hmm. And I never heard a follow-up, and I wanted to know if you have any information or update about whether or not that property is still up for sale or whether it was sold or whatever.
So it's funny because on my notes for tonight, on the page before that is my list of things. And one of that is that I need to be dusting off and reconvening our 7-Eleven committee. So we still own the property. I believe that you're referring to, Mr. Carriedo, out at East Lake Parkway. That's still our property.
No, I was speaking about
on 3rd.
I was speaking about the one that's over by.
Right. So I was saying, right. We sold that.
St. Rose of Lima.
Yes, we sold that. I think we were in COVID more towards the beginning of COVID. We were, because I remember sitting in my dining room while the auctioning was happening, or the bidding war on that. And we had to do all of it remotely. So like in the very first couple months of COVID, that property was sold. We sold it for $5.7 million or something like that, I think. So, but we will be, so that happened. But we will be reconvening the 7-Eleven committee, because there are, as part of the discussion we've just been having this evening, there's lots of things that we will need to be kind of doing our due diligence on and exploring. And so having the 7-Eleven committee kind of live and active and meeting will likely be an essential piece of future conversation.
So the 3rd Avenue property sold, and there's still a property out in East Lake that's still up in the air.
Yep.
Yeah, we actually have 2 unused properties now. So the 3rd Avenue did sell last year.
Okay, and then you have the L Street property.
No, L Street's not unused. We use L Street.
No. That's another large piece of property that's been
correct.
talked about for years when the new operations or office center gets built someday.
Yeah, we'll be looking to do that. We already have some program migrating over there, and then as leases are coming over, like Harbor Freight was just there and their lease expired, we are not replacing those. We are not re-renting those or leasing those facilities out.
So we're going to lose Harbor Freight?
Harbor Freight has already moved. They moved down on the other side of, I don't know what street that is, but they're right where the old Toys R Us is, was right there at the end of L Street on the 5.
Okay.
They moved, I don't know, like
Gosh.
6-7 months ago already.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, they've been gone for a minute.
If there are no other comments, I have one comment. Are there going to be any state or federal money coming to the school district that are going to be used for construction that you know of to the school district?
It's a great question. Are you talking like in regards to the infrastructure bill and things like that?
Yeah, infrastructure or pandemic relief or.
So, yeah. So under the pandemic, there's just volumes and volumes of what I'll call our ESSER funds. And so there are some allocations that have come towards the facility side of the house, where we have the district identified like $2 million for nutrition services for equipment and improvements to the cafeterias. We also have about $2 million for maintenance, and we're using those funds to create equipment packages basically for each of our campuses, so everybody has the same access to the same kind of tools and resources for sanitary, deep cleaning, things like that on their campuses. And then currently we do have, the number has changed, so I'm just going to call it 10. 10 million, there is about $10 million is identified within the ESSER plan right now for HVAC. And we are actually looking at using those funds to do replacement of some of the control systems on some of the campuses, because right now many of our campuses have multiple EMS systems, and it's a lot of work and not efficient for maintenance. And so we're looking at, because we did such a robust program with the district-wide HVAC a few years ago, controls was not included in that. So we're looking at being able to hit many of our campuses with that improvement. So that's kind of where we currently stand in terms of the ESSER COVID-related funds. And then it's still a question mark out there, Mr. Munoz, about how we will see any,
if you will see any.
Well, you know, we'll see it. It's going to come in those lovely packages that get sent to us all the time of opportunity for us to pursue, you know, electrical this, electrical that, but it's associated. I mean, there's, you know, it's kind of no different than like solar panels or batteries and things like that. Solar panel, there's contracts and layers to it, and we look at those like we look at if we would ever consider, you know, new cell tower contracts, and that's a hard no for us because many of them are not to our advantage. There are some good ones out there. We do look for the ones that come through like SDG&E and some of our utility partners versus the ones that are just kind of floating, because a lot of times there's money that goes out, but it doesn't come back to us. And so we will keep an eye on that. We have IES is back on board with us for energy management consultant services, and they work right in tandem with Mr. Malone at maintenance and myself. And they're great partners in terms of finding those opportunities for us to pursue, and they will be all over tracking those, you know, how that infrastructure funds will be distributed and where we might be able to benefit from that in terms of improvements or access to our campuses. So especially we are focused on reducing our footprint. And so that's a key piece for us that we'll be pursuing with that. Sorry, Athena.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to add that a couple of regular board meetings ago, Dr. Salkelt gave a presentation, I believe in conjunction with Anna, on the ESSER funds and our plans regarding the ESSER funds. You can also go, CDE has great resources on how the ESSER funds are guided. So if you wanted to look at the CDE website, they have that information there as well. But we do have a plan regarding those funds that came out of the pandemic.
I'm looking at Claudia. Claudia put a question in the chat. She says, how are supply chain issues affecting the cost of projects? Is the school district entertaining automatic increases to raw materials? So no to the second question. It hasn't been a discussion. And frankly, I think it's because of where we kind of stand with the volume of projects, right? So when this started to really exacerbate, we were already in the middle of the projects we have that we talked about earlier tonight, or keying them, getting them off the ground. So we kind of hit a sweet spot on some of that. So far from the supply chain, we haven't been having an issue with getting materials. That doesn't mean that we're not seeing upticks. What we're hearing from the contractors and from our construction management firms and things like that is because there's so much unknown that's happening out in the industry. Day of bids, you can see anywhere from a 25% to 40% markup just thrown onto bids because contractors are trying to cover themselves, but they don't know what they're covering themselves for. And so we're working on, some ways to mitigate that. That's the one nice thing about for right now. We're not going to be, with the exception of getting that Sioux High concession stand, just kind of putting a pin in it and being done. We will have a little bit of a lapse here, thankfully, of us putting projects out on the street. And so hopefully, as we continue to move through where we currently stand as a country with COVID and more globally as well, we'll start to see some stabilization with that. I don't want to jinx myself, Claudia. So far, we have been okay with regards to your first question about supply chain. I think we're seeing costs just in terms of just random markups that are kind of unexplained. So, and that's where we saw some of our bids come in, and we had to make some increases to some of the projects on bid day because we had seen like a 25% increase on those bids. So
got it. Thank you.
That was a good question, Claudia. Very good question. So, any other comments under the agenda item for project updates and staff announcements by the committee? Okay, now we'll move on to new business and future agenda items. Any other comments or discussions on that from staff or the committee? Because I have one little quickie.
I have one, Ralph.
Okay.
I think, Mr. Carrieto brought it up last time. Are we going to start to do site visits again at the different school sites? Is that going to come back anytime soon?
That's entirely up to staff and how the protocol works out for on-site visitors. As far as I know, there are no on-site visitors. Is that correct, Janae, or when's that going to change?
It's starting to become a little bit more fluid. I think the committee has to make the decision that they're ready for it. We've been doing board meetings in person. And I know that there's some extenuating circumstances in a couple areas with committee members. So we want to be respectful and honor that. So I think that if we're ready to do that, I think there's a few things that could happen. One, if we're doing site visits, it's a site visit and whoever can join us can join us. Then move back to a meeting platform similar to this. And for those who want to be in the same space, we could do something like that and everybody else could be virtual. It does get a little bit hectic when you have different things happening with, some people have their microphones on and technology just gets a little funky. We can continue to stay where we are. I think the last time we talked about it, Mr. Munoz, was that for the January meeting, we would touch base and see where everybody was at. So we can certainly have Yoli maybe make a note for when we first come back after the winter break holiday, maybe send a feeler out to everybody and see where we're at and how folks are feeling about it. In general, I guess for me is our committee members feeling as though they would want to start to return to that or do some site visits. And when you say site visits, you want to just go anywhere? You want to go to some of the sites where we actually have a project? Like for me, I would say let's go to Hilltop Middle because that's a project I can actually walk you through from a safety perspective, and you can see some of the work while it's still underway. By the time we actually get there in January, it's going to be done. But it'll be a good thing for you all to see as well, right? Like what does a newly modernized science classroom wing look like? So.
No, I'm totally agreeing with you, Janaea. I think that one of the other stumbling blocks is the daylight savings time, is that we wouldn't be able to see anything on the outside, and if it's under construction, there wouldn't be any light, so it would be, you know, we have to wait for the time change on some of this. So when we talk about it in January, it will be a good time to make some decisions on how to proceed, because I think the time change will come soon afterwards.
I was going to say, but if you meet in January, we meet in the same platform in January. By the time you're doing your next meeting, daylight savings has either happened or the days have stretched long enough that we would be able to move to that. So,
yes.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's great.
Let's do that. Talk about it then.
Okay, so we'll put that. I'll have Yoli will put that on the agenda. So
okay, good.
Back to in-person meetings ? Right, and site visits. Okay. And then I will say that if we do, and if we do move back to the in-person meetings, Mr. Munoz, we can figure that out where, you know, we're in a space that's large enough that folks can be, you know, have their masks on, but be distributed and still be comfortable, even, and, you know, make sure we have doors and things like that that are open. So there's, you know, air is being circulated, et cetera. So.
Oh, that's good. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other comments from any of the other committee members before I have my comment?
Ralph?
Yes.
An item for the next agenda. I was interested in seeing if the staff can make some sort of a presentation about, it'll be in January, I believe, so, about what process they envision having to determine where the next projects will be going.
Mm-hmm. Does that work for you, Janelle?
I don't know. It might. I mean, I love the theory. Theoretically, it will. I just don't know where I will be in my process to make sure that I can share with you the process. But I will definitely have a high-level outline at that point, just kind of with timeline, et cetera. So, I mean, I can put something together, and I think it would be a good opportunity to re-share for the couple of you that have been with us what that score sheet kind of looked like before, and then visually, so you would all see it. And Athena and I will certainly be talking about it between now and then about how we would be refining it. We were also looking at our master plan in general, because there's things in there that need to change, be updated, et cetera. So yes, I can. I will have something. It's not going to probably be our whole process, but I will have the bones of the process for you.
Maybe just to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. We're on the same page, Mr. Carradine, and timing wise, it'll actually be worth it for me to start working on it now. So, because any effort.
Well, it's actually good for the new members. It's actually good for the new members.
Yeah. No, it will be great because it'll actually help facilitate the process with the committee as we move through the year.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And then if there are no other comments, or are there comments further from the rest of the committee members? Okay. Well, one thing I just wanted to bring up is that the attendance for a couple of our committee members, I don't know if they've been excused absences or not, but Kimberly Tesorio is a new member and has not attended a couple meetings. My concern is that, is she getting advised, or is she just?
So we'll have to check in with her. Yeah, we'll have to check in with her. I know that Yoli had checked in with her, and I thought I had heard that you had also touched base with her. That might not be accurate, but I know that Yoli.
No, I did not.
Okay, I know that Yoli had communicated with her, and she had stated that she was going to be here. The other one is Mr. Hazlitt. We have not seen in a minute as well. So let me have. Well, I'll have Yoli reach out to both and see if there's anything happening that's preventing them, or if they've shifted gears with desire to be here, and we'll go from there and figure out next step if we need to.
Sure, keep me informed, let me know what's going on, because according to our policies and bylaws, it says if a person has 3 unexcused absences, they are no longer on this committee, and I think we should proceed with terminating or refilling those positions when somebody who's got a more active interest serving on the committee
Yeah, so we'll check into that and find out what's happening with
Sure.
Kimberly. And I don't remember, I mean, Yoli can pull it. We can take a look at how many Mr. Hazlitt's been absent on as well. He wasn't
This is
here
the
last
second.
time, but yeah, so we'll take a look and we'll go from there.
No, it's just my
And that-
concern that
Yeah.
we're all volunteers and
Yep.
we're we don't get paid for this or anything, but I mean, all of us, I think, are community members who wanted to fulfill a responsibility, and we do have a responsibility to at least attend the meetings and give some input.
Yeah.
And provide that representation that the community has entrusted to us. And then we're also responsible to the community too to answer their question, because I get asked all sorts of questions all the time, and it's part of the responsibility of volunteering to be part of this group.
Right.
And it's maybe not a real prestigious position, but we all should do our part.
Okay. Well, we'll check it out and we'll report back.
Okay, and let me know too before the next meeting. I'd like to just be in the loop there.
Yep.
I have no other business, and if nobody else has any other business, I would just recommend that we adjourn the meeting. And our next meeting, I believe, is January 19th, and hopefully that everyone will have a special time with their families and then holidays coming up. And we'll see you next year. And Janaea and staff, thank you very much. And also to the committee.
Pleasure. Thank you, everybody. It's nice to see you. Have great holidays. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Night.
Thank you.